residents of Davenport. My husband left a wonderful legacy to Davenport. He was born in 1851 in Germany. His father, J.H. Petersen, was a prosperous businessman who sold matches. But not just any matches. He would tip the ends of the matches with colors, national colors of different countries that he exported the matches to. This seems like an insignificant little thing, but it brought my father a lot, his father a lot of money. Unfortunately, the Danes took over the province and they used depreciated currency. And this depreciated currency put Mr. Petersen out of business. In March of 1860, he put his wife and 5 children on a boat for America. He had $3,000 in his pocket to start a new life here. His plan was to buy a farm and to live there and learn the customs and the language of the United States. He purchased a 120-acre farm for $10 an acre out by Maysville. My husband Billy used to say that his father didn't even know how to hitch up a team of horses, and he didn't even know the difference between a plow and a harrow, but somehow he managed to do the farming. He also remembers as a small child hearing wolves outside their cabin door, howling at the moon on the prairie. They lived on the farm for a year, and then he moved them back into Davenport. And he went with some land seekers to Nebraska to check out the land out there. While he was gone, he rented the farmland, and the renters harvested the crop, sold the crop, and scammed away with the money, leaving Mrs. Petersen without any form of income for her family. So Billy and his brothers had to go to work. Billy worked for the Chicago Times, selling newspapers. The Civil War was in progress at the time, and newspapers sold quite rapidly. The pay was poor, but the business was good. Somehow his mother got through it, though, until the father came back from Nebraska. When his father returned, he joined a vigilante group here in Davenport, and that was a home guard unit that protected the citizens while their soldiers were away at war. William was very impressed by this martial atmosphere that was taking place at that time. His father tried his luck with manufacturing matches again, but there was a stamp tax on the matches, which made it impossible for small business people to compete with the larger businesses. There was the Diamond Match Company was a large match company at the time, and they were able to stand up against the tax, but Billy's father could not. But prior to this, Billy had been selling his father's matches door to door. So when the business failed, he had another idea. He went and bought matches by the gross and still went door to door and sold them, and he made 50 to 75 cents a day selling the matches door to door. He proved to be an excellent salesperson. But Billy wanted a real job, so he went into a merchant on 2nd Street and told him that he'd like to work for him. And the merchant handed him a broom and said, "Okay, you've got a job." He saved his money, and along with his brother, they purchased a business in Waterloo. They prospered twice, but they lost all their money twice. But it was not any fault of their own. The business, the actual properties belonged to somebody else, and that's where the problem came in, that they lost everything that they made. So they came back to Davenport, and along with their father, they purchased a store on the corner of the southeast corner of Main and 2nd Street. And they started a store. Eventually they had 400 employees. Their belief was to be fair and honest with their customers, and that motto paid off. In 1892, 20 years after they started the business, they were able to build a real store. It was 4 stories high, and it proved to be the finest store this side of Chicago. In 1914, with his brothers and his father having passed away, Billy decided that it was time to maybe sell the business. So he did sell the stock to Harned-Von Maur, but he kept the property in his own name. He basically learned his own lesson from earlier times in Waterloo. My husband was instrumental in cleaning up the levee, which for many years was used as a dumping ground. His influence with the city council and other high officials, and his good business sense, managed to procure the funds to do the cleanup job. It was then turned into a public place for enjoyment. He was known as the father of the Davenport levee because of this work that he did. He even paid and erected a lovely bandshell for our daughter Wilma, and that bandshell still stands today. Perhaps you've seen the bandshell in the Leclerc Park. Now I'm going to tell you my favorite part of the story. In the early 1870s, a young lady went into the Petersen store and she wanted to buy some fabric. Mr. Petersen waited on her and she took her fabric and she left. A little bit later, she came back in and she asked Mr. Petersen if he would consider hiring her as a clerk. Well, he said he didn't need any clerks right then, but the first opening that came along, he would keep her in mind. So one day, an opening came up and he went looking for the young lady. All he knew was that she lived near Locust and Brady Streets in Davenport. So he went from house to house looking for her. Believe it or not, he managed to find her by seeing the same fabric that she bought from him in the store through the doorway of a household. So he hired her on the spot. She proved to be an excellent clerk, but she also caught the eye of the young Mr. Petersen. Her name was Sarah Hopkins, and yes, I am that young lady. He proposed to me, and we planned to get married in January of 1875. However, he swore that he would not get married until he had $5,000 in the bank. As the date of our wedding drew near, he checked his funds. He only had $4,987. He was $13 short, so we had to postpone the wedding. However, he did manage to get to the $5,000 mark, and we did get married on February 4th, 1875. We had 4 children. Sadly, our first 2 children died in infancy. We had a daughter named Wilma, and we also had a son named Edwin. Billy loved to go riding in the evening with his black horses pulling our beautiful carriage. He also loved his Gordon Setter dogs and his cigars. He loved his cigars. Our daughter Wilma had health problems all her life. Due to tuberculosis, we lived in Arizona, Switzerland, and eventually Altadena, California, where my darling Billy built us a beautiful and majestic mansion. We lived there off and on, and Billy would come out and visit us as well. That is where I died in 1920, and Billy died in 1928. However, we both came back to Davenport, our first home, to be buried in this beautiful mausoleum that Billy erected for me when I died in 1920. I hope you have a good afternoon, and remember, if you ever shop at a store by the name of Von Maur, think kindly of my husband, whose family was the family that started that whole business. Thank you.